I want to talk to you today about the way that we are at a turning point in history. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, our technologies are not so much aimed outward at modifying our environment in the fashion of fire, clothes, cities, agriculture, space travel, that sort of thing. Instead, our technologies are increasingly aimed inward at modifying our minds, our memories, our metabolisms, and our children. And if you can do all that, then we are at the startling situation where we're becoming the first species to take control of our own evolution, not in some distant science fiction future, but right now on our watch. And what radical evolution is about is the roadmap to this transformation in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Someday soon, your kid, or some kid you know, is going to come home from school again in tears. And he's going to be saying that he just can't compete with the other kids who are smarter than he is, better behaved than he is, more athletic than he is, more beautiful than he is, and more capable of getting into the best colleges. And the difference will be that their parents have embraced the enhancement technologies, the human enhancement technologies, that are increasingly coming online, and you haven't. So the question is, what are you going to do when that day comes? Well, there's three possibilities that I can think of. One is that you turn to them and you say, I don't care what other people do with their minds, the minds and bodies of their children. We love you just the way you are. Go wipe your nose. Go play in traffic. The other possibility is you could mangmo sam chon gi gyo. Is that close? Pretty close? Okay. You know, you could decide that you're going to just redouble all your efforts to try to help the kid compete with these other kids. The third possibility is that you could try to get these enhanced kids thrown out of your school. Now, the problem with that third part is that if you try to get these other kids thrown out, it just widens the gap between these kids who are using all of these new technologies and the rest of us. And that's a scary scenario when you just start widening the gap between humans. But what you can't do is ignore this, because these changes in what it means to be human are coming at you right now. This is one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons. I don't know if those in the back can read it. It says, obviously, they're evolving much faster than we are. Now, let me tell you how all this came about. I'm a reporter and editor for the Washington Post in Washington, D.C., the newspaper there. And the way I started reporting on this was that I began to realize how fast our world was changing. Here, let me see a show of hands. Is anybody here old enough to remember the Sony Walkman? Most of you, right? Okay. Is anybody here old enough to remember when computer screens only came in black and white? Fewer. All right. Is anybody here old enough to remember what a bus cha-jung was? The bus lady? Okay. All right. Is anybody here old enough to remember what a yogong was? Okay. Is anybody here old enough to remember Mabi, polio? Right, fewer. How's that? Am I getting close? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Now, the reason so many don't remember some of the things that I'm talking about there is that we've been living through a period of exponential change that I call the curve. technology has been replacing things so fast in our lives that we've become accustomed to it. We now think that it's normal. Many of you in this room are probably familiar with the most common way that this is referred to in the computer world. Does anybody here know what I mean when I say Moore's Law? The idea that computers are doubling in power every 18 months? How many people know what I'm talking about? Okay, most people. All right. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, back in 1965, there was a physical chemist named Gordon E. Moore, and he was in Silicon Valley. This was 6 years after the first successful commercial computer chip in 1959. And he noticed that the number of transistors that you could get on a piece of silicon for $1 was doubling every few months. And he boldly proclaimed that these doublings would continue for another 10 years. Well, little did he know. Gordon E. Moore ended up becoming one of the 3 founders of Intel. Intel Inside, the computer chip guys. And he's now a bazillionaire many times over. But that's probably not why he's going to be remembered in history. He's probably going to be remembered for this observation about the doubling of computer firepower, because Moore's Law, as it is now called, is the core faith of the entire global information technology industry. And the way it's usually come to be stated now is that the amount of computer firepower that you can buy for $1 will double every 18 months for as far as the eye can see. Now, a doubling is an amazing thing. It means that every step, every 18 months, is as tall as all of the previous steps put together. So this is a curve that goes up like that. We've had 32 doublings of computer firepower since 1959. That's an increase of over 1 billion times in the lifetime of people who are in this room. That's unprecedented. We've never seen anything like that before in human history. Does anybody here have an iPhone? Hold it up. Anybody got an iPhone? No iPhones in the room?
I did.
There. Okay. Hold. You got it? You got it on you? Hold it up. Yeah. Okay. See that thing? That single phone has more computer firepower than did the entire North American Air Defense Command in 1965 when Gordon E. Moore first prophesied. That's the kind of change that we're talking about. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this yourself. Who hasn't, decided that they're going to buy a computer for their kid for Christmas? And you go out and you say, oh gosh, this thing is wonderful, and it's 20,000 won, but it's got 8 gigabytes of this and 456 of something else. It's just a fire breather, right? So you buy it, and the next Christmas, it's come down in price by 1/3, right? And you're kicking yourself. Well, by the arithmetic of Moore's Law, a $2,000 computer today, in 10 years, you'll be able to buy the same amount of computer firepower for $31.25, and you'll be able to get it for free with a subscription to Newsweek or The Economist, right? This kind of increase in firepower means that pretty soon you're going to be able to buy a computer that looks like this. The patents for this it's the flexible computer, flexible screen. It has voice recognition. The patents for this already exist. The prototypes already exist. And I can hardly wait, just waiting for the price to come down, and I can hardly wait for the day when I can buy a computer that looks like this, because it means that it will allow me to read the newspaper on the computer in the smallest room of the house where I get my best reading done. That's a joke. Not a much of a joke, but a joke. Now, what this also means, this curve, It means that the future is coming at us ever faster. By the arithmetic of Moore's law, the last 20 years is not a guide to the next 20 years. It's at best a guide to the next 8. And the last 50 years is not a guide to the next 50 years. It's at best a guide to the next 14. And it's how that we handle this accelerating change that is what I want to talk to you about today. Because I don't really care about the technology all that much. I'm not a gear freak. I'm not in love with these computers. I'm interested in society and culture and values and how we're going to handle this incredible change. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, this curve of change that I'm talking about is really nothing tremendously new. It didn't just start. There have been 3 kinds of evolution historically. The first kind was the kind that Darwin talked about, biological evolution. And what's interesting about biological evolution, Darwinian evolution, is that it accelerated on a curve too. From the first living organisms to the first mammals, that took 400 million years. From the first mammals to the first monkeys, took 150 million years. From monkeys to chimpanzees, took 30 million years. See how this is going faster and faster? From chimpanzees to walking erect took 16 million years. From walking erect to humans painting on cave walls, that took 4 million years. From painting on cave walls to the first fixed settlements took 10,000 years. See how it's keeping on going faster and faster? And then to writing took 4,000 years. Now, when we got to writing, evolution kicked into a new phase. Because all of a sudden we had cultural evolution. And that meant that we could store and share and collect our ideas in a fashion that had never been possible before. We weren't limited just to our little bands of humans. We could start sharing our ideas with all kinds of other humans. So cultural evolution kicks in, and that moves ever faster. So from going to first writing to the Roman Empire took 4,000 years. From the Roman Empire to the Industrial Revolution took 1,800 years. From the Industrial Revolution to first flight takes 100 years, and 66 years later we're on the moon, wondering what we've done. Because again, this is all happening to us faster and faster. Shortly, 20 years after that, we're in the information age, wondering what we've done. And the information age and Moore's law is what's kicking into this third kind of evolution, what I call radical evolution or engineered evolution, where we're starting to control our own destinies. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. This is my favorite owl monkey. Her name is Belle. She's alive and well at Duke University in North Carolina. This is the first monkey who was able to become telekinetic. I'm not making this up. Belle can move physical objects long distance, 600 miles, with her thoughts. No kidding. Would you like to know how you make a monkey telekinetic? How you can get her to move an object with her thoughts? I'll tell you. Okay, Belle was funded at Duke to, what they did was first they got her hooked on computer games. She's a real smart monkey. So she had a joystick, and if the cursor moved and it hit a flashing light, she got a drop of juice. But she's real smart, so pretty soon it became real clear that she almost cared about the juice. What she was really interested in was the computer game. So as soon as she got hooked on the computer game, they then drilled a hole in her head. And they took a computer device the size of a baby aspirin, and it had hundreds of superfine wires coming out of it, and they put it on top of her motor cortex, which is the part of the brain where you plan muscle movement, right? And what they did with this device is they took the superfine wires and they lined up each one of them with one of the neurons in her brain. So when her brain fired, her brain neurons fired, the wires could pick this up and realize that the neurons had engaged, and they could try to see the patterns in what her thoughts would be as she played the computer game. Am I making sense? Am I communicating here? Yeah? Okay. All right, so they then proceeded to seal her up, and they turned on the computer game. She played the computer game with her arm. They're watching the brain activity go on in her brain with their computers. When they think they see the pattern, when they think they understand what's going on, that's when they do the dramatic thing, and they disconnect her joystick so that nothing she does with her arm does any good anymore. Okay? They then fire up the computer game, and she pretty soon figures out that the only way she can control the cursor is by thinking about where she wants the cursor to be. And she's controlling the cursor with her brain, not with her arm. She quickly figures that out, and sure enough, boom, she starts hitting the flashing light with the cursor, just using her brain modulated by the computer. The whole lab starts cheering. They're very excited. Then to be cool about it, they take the signal from her brain through the computer, they put it on the internet, and they send it 600 miles north to MIT in Massachusetts, where there's a robotic arm, and they put the signal, attach it to the robotic arm, and there the robotic arm starts dancing like a ballerina in exactly the same fashion that Belle's arm would be moving if she had been using her arm to play the game. Now, I submit to you that if you've got a monkey that can control a robotic arm 600 miles away with her thoughts, what you've got is a telekinetic monkey. Now, the obvious question is, why? Why would you want to do this to a monkey? And as usual, there's two answers. There's the official answer, and then there's the real answer. The official answer is that this research was funded by an organization called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the United States. And it's an organization that's the research and development arm for the Pentagon. And the reason they were funding this is that they observed that an F-35 jet fighter is an extremely difficult airplane to control with a joystick. So they're thinking, well, how much better would it be if you could have a direct mind-machine connection between a human and the plane itself, so that you thought about where you wanted it to go and it would just go. And they thought, how cool would it be if you could also have two-way connections between your mind and the machine? Suppose that the machine, everything that the machine could sense, radar, radio, stresses, acceleration, every sensor you've got, suppose you could pipe that directly into the brain, bypassing keyboards and screens. Wouldn't that be a much better way to fight wars? That's the official reason. But then there's the real reason. The real reason is that the guy who was running this program at the time was named Michael Goldblatt. And he has a daughter named Gina Marie. Now, Gina Marie is a very talented young lady. She is 22 now. She's graduated from college. She's bilingual. She wants to be a lawyer. Very accomplished young lady. And she's got cerebral palsy. So she's paralyzed, and she's expected to spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. Well, her father, Michael, has spent God only knows how many millions of dollars to get her out of that wheelchair. Because Michael was pushing, and he's very upfront about this, he was pushing this program because the way he sees it is that if you can control machines with your thoughts, there's no reason why those machines couldn't be in Gina Marie's legs. And if she could control the machines in her legs, he thinks, then she can get out of that wheelchair and walk. So the real reason this was being pushed was, as far as he was concerned, was the reason to create, a better world for his daughter by giving her an enhancement that resolved the problem that nature created. Now, so that's the reason. Now the thing is that all of these enhancements always follow the same path. They're initially aimed at people who are really sick, like Gina Marie. But any one of these enhancements then moves out to the needy well, people who could really use it, and then it moves out to the merely ambitious. And the classic example of that is this guy, Barry Bonds. Do we have any baseball fans in the room? Barry Bonds is a home run hitter on the San Francisco Giants, and he broke all kinds of baseball records. And then it was discovered that he'd abused steroids. Now, steroids are the first primitive kind of pharmacological and human enhancements. And they work, obviously. I mean, he hit a lot of home runs. But we're having this, it's interesting to me that we're having this first kind of confused discussion of how do we feel about having enhanced humans walking around among us. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Where we're having this conversation is on the sports pages. Now, in benefit of hindsight, that makes a certain amount of sense. All technologies are adopted first wherever you'll find the most competition. So it's not too surprising that these technologies that I'm about to tell you about, they confer such incredible advantages on the people who adopt them that you see the first adopters, the early adopters, in places like the military, like sports, and also in the sex appeal industry, like Viagra, Botox, things like that. That's where you're seeing the first big uptake in these technologies. Now, there are 4 technologies that are shaping this radical evolution. I call them the GRIN technologies for genetics, robotics, information, and nanotechnology. All right, this is the first. This is the genetic technology. Anybody know who this is? Dolly, the sheep? Yeah. Okay, this is Dolly. The genetic technologies, this is actually more than just genetics. This is about manipulating and understanding cells at the very most basic levels. This is basically controlling life itself. The implications of this is not just in the far distant future where we might have direct genetic interventions. We're having practical results as a result of the sequencing of the human genome that's occurring right now. For example, in the next 5 years or so, you should see on the market memory pills. These are pills that dramatically allow, they're originally aimed at people who are really sick, like Alzheimer's patients. But if they work in people who are really sick, they'll also work on you and me. Okay? And so here I am, an aging baby boomer. There are millions of people like me who can't remember, where they park their car or if they have a car, And all of a sudden, the idea of memory pills coming on the market. Well, the pharmacological companies think this is going to be the biggest thing since Viagra. They think this is going to be just one of the world's great sellers. And these kind of cognition-enhancing and memory-enhancing drugs are on the market. Already, there are cognition enhancers that are readily available. You can get them with a prescription. One of them is called modafinil, or Preveil. This is a drug. It's not a stimulant. It's not like amphetamines. It's not speed. There's no rush to it. It simply shuts off the human trigger to sleep. It just shuts off. And it helps you concentrate even more. So when this was first tested on healthy young helicopter pilots, they put them in a simulator, and these helicopter pilots went for 40 hours without sleep. And at the end of the 40 hours with using modafinil, they were performing as well as or better than the well-rested. Then they let them sleep for 8 hours. They brought them up again, and they went for another 40 hours. And at the end of the next 40 hours, they were still performing as well as or better than the well-rested. Now, these drugs like this are already have a huge gray market, certainly on American campuses. For all I know, there are big sellers on Korean campuses too. What they do is allow you to go without sleep. I mean, they're a magic pill for students, right? You know, who want to get into graduate school. You can go for a long time, and it increases your focus. There's no cognitive side effects as far as anybody knows. But the thing is, in these first-generation pills, you ultimately have to repay your sleep debt. You have to catch up on your sleep in this first generation. But the next generation, they're talking about not having to repay your sleep debt. So think of the social implications of stuff like this. This means that, you know, you're talking about lawyers who never sleep. You know, I mean, the implications of this are pretty scary. And there's lots of other technologies that are coming online that are similar to this. One of them is created by Certrus Pharmaceuticals. Certrus Pharmaceuticals was co-founded by a member of the Harvard Medical School. It's the leading developer of drugs that mimic resveratrol. This is the chemical that's found in red wine. Resveratrol actually seems to reverse. In mice, this drug has found to work against lung and colon cancer. It works against melanoma, skin cancer. It works against lymphoma, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and Alzheimer's disease. It's a pretty remarkable drug. And what's more, as I say, it has some evidence that it actually reverses aging. Now, this compound is in stage 2 clinical trials. Okay, it's close to being commercial, and Certrus expects a commercial product to be on the shelves in the middle of this coming decade, in 4 to 6 years. Think about that. Age reversal, 6 or 7 years. Okay, now there's the robotics technologies. Now what this is about is taking machines and melding them with humans, in which it's increasingly hard to tell where the machines leave off and the humans begin. This is a Predator. You probably recognize it. It's an unmanned air vehicle. It has no pilot. This is the Predator is increasingly the backbone of an awful lot of warfare. Over 100 countries fly unmanned air vehicles now, and when you hear about some successful operation in Afghanistan where somebody it's one of these robots that's done the job. It turns out that all of the powers of our comic book superheroes that we had in the 30s and 40s, every single one of those superpowers is now either available or is in development. So, for example, at the University of California at Berkeley, they're creating what's called exoskeletons. These exoskeletons are like wearable robot suits, okay? You step into this suit, and what it does is it amplifies your muscle movement so that you squat like this, the machine squats, and it allows you to lift 180 pounds, and it feels to you like 4 pounds. So I asked these guys, I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, does it allow me to leap tall buildings with a single bound, like Superman? And they said, oh yeah. Oh yeah, leaping a tall building with a single bound? Oh sure, it could do that. That's not the problem. Landing. Now that's the problem. That's the part that they haven't worked out yet. So that's, yeah. So I mean, but the thing is, it's under development. I mean, you know, this is pretty amazing stuff. Already they're using functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, fMRIs. These are these great big machines that they put you into like a shotgun shell, and they make a movie of your brain while it's working. And already they're beginning to use that to determine whether or not you're lying. Now imagine that. Imagine, you know, if you're to the point where lying is no longer part of human nature. What's that about? And there's tons of other machines that are becoming part of the human equipment. One of them is the cochlear implant. This is a device that allows the profoundly deaf to hear. It's not a hearing aid. These are people who've got basically nothing in their ears at all, so amplification doesn't matter. These are computers that take sound from out here, turn it into digital signals, and pipe that directly into your brain. There are tens of thousands of these that are already in use all around the world. Also, there's now ocular implants, which is the same idea. It's for your eye. You have a computer. These are profoundly blind people who have computer cameras, and you pipe the signal directly into their brain. One of the questions that I've always wondered, they're talking about brain implants that would allow you to understand languages and learn languages like that. Okay, so let me give you a test here. If I had a computer chip that I could sell you today, okay, and it would involve putting it in your brain, and this computer chip would allow you to understand and speak English fluently like that, how many people would go for it? Yeah. Huh? See? Gotcha, right? Yeah. That's about what usually happens. I usually get about 50% of the audience who's had the world's worst experience in language school, right? And they say, sure, computer implant, learn languages, no problem. That's about what I usually get. Okay, so now, then there's the information technologies, the I in the GRIN technologies. Now, that's, we've heard so much about this over the last day and a half about the information technology. But think about how much this has changed our lives already. My wife went out to buy a new cell phone. She came back with a cell phone that has, that 15 years ago, this phone would have been science fiction. 15 years ago. This phone has a camera, it has GPS, it has an MP3 player, it has email. This is the cheapest Nokia she could find, $30. 15 years ago, that was science fiction. Okay? There's all sorts of examples of that. Is anybody here old enough to remember when music players came with 4 great big boxes covered with walnut, you know? And you had to lift it up on a shelf, these speakers, you know? Anybody remember this? Right? Okay. These enormous boxes covered with walnut. All right. Then it became the Sony Walkman, right? Now it's jewelry, right? The Nano, right? Pretty soon it's going to be an earring. There's Moore's Law at work, right? In the information technologies. Now, all of this stuff becomes cheaper and smaller, and pretty soon it's going to be an implant. And you ever heard about having a song stuck in your head that you can't forget? Just watch. You have no idea. You know, when one of these nanos starts becoming a brain implant. Now the thing is that these technologies are just a step away from universal translators. Already, both Google and DARPA have chest-mounted universal translators that are pretty good. That they'll translate about 5,000 words between any language pairs with about 80% accuracy. Not as good as a human, but good enough for a lot of purposes, right? So if it's right now this big, how soon will it be that it's an earring You know, I mean, this is what these information technologies promise. The two founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they were talking about this world 5 years ago. Everybody thought they were kidding. They thought that they were just making this up. Oh no. Oh no. Sergey Brin told Newsweek in 2004, where can you go? Well, certainly, if you had all the world's information directly attached to your brain, or an artificial brain that was smarter than your brain, you'd be better off. He said that 5 years ago. Everybody thought he was kidding. Ha ha ha. Oh no. Oh no. A year later, in 2005, he said, quote, why not improve the brain? Perhaps in the future, we can attach a little version of Google that you can just plug into your brain. This is the sort of things that are being talked about. All right, now the last of these technologies, whoops, there we are, is the nanotechnologies. I ripped off this drawing from Wired magazine. It's a fanciful drawing, but it refers to nanotechnology is the revolution in which you can start building anything you want, one atom at a time or one molecule at a time. It promises to transform everything that's made. Every manufactured item is made. The way we manufacture things right now is we take like a big block of steel and then make it into a smaller piece of steel that you put into an automobile. This works exactly the other way around. This works in a bottom-up way, so you take the tiniest possible parts, atoms and molecules, and you build up to whatever you want. A diamond, a T-bone steak, a rocket ship, whatever you want. This is expected to be a $1 trillion a year industry by 2015. That's roughly the size of the gross national product of Canada. So, I mean, this is moving real fast. And the implications of this are staggering. One of the early uses of this stuff is going to be called what's called nanobots. These are extremely tiny robots, hundreds of times smaller than a human blood cell. You inject these into your brain, into your blood vessels, millions of them. And what they do is they go out and they're like watchdogs. They go out and look for cancer cells, for example. And if they see them, they send off an alarm. That's the first generation. The second generation is supposed to be hunter-killers, so that when they find the cancer cells, they attack them and devour them. Now, in principle, you could also use this to attack fat cells, so that, if you were fat, you could take these nanobots and you could cure obesity. They were telling me about this, and I'm writing this all down, And they said, and suddenly I realized that they're talking about, curing obesity with just one injection. At which point I say, me, give some to me, right? I mean, I have been working out for how long, to what effect? I mean, I'll take, you know how this goes. Well, the most important thing about nanotechnology is that it kicks all of these other technologies into a new orbit, in which we're all of a sudden genetics, robotics, and information technology all moves faster because you're fundamentally controlling matter and energy. Now, as I told you, I don't really care that much about technology. I don't care about boys and their toys. I just told you all this because what I do care about is culture and values and society, and I want to know, where is this taking us? What's our future look like? Now, I don't make predictions. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know anybody who does. What I do is scenarios. And these are stories that are faithful to all the facts that we know, but they talk about 3 different ways in which our world might develop. And when you talk to the technologists who are inventing all of this new stuff, this is how they usually tell you there's 3 possibilities. One is the heaven scenario. This is the one in which you see this curve of change that goes up like this, and it conquers stupidity ignorance, ugliness, pain, being fat, forgetfulness, disease, suffering, and even death. It's essentially indistinguishable from the Christian version of heaven. Everything works great. What a happy day this is. 30 or 40 years, if you can just stay alive for the next 20 years, you'll be immortal. It'll be terrific. That's the heaven scenario. Might happen. It's a credible scenario. The technology is moving that fast. Could be, but it's only one scenario. The other scenario is the mirror opposite. This is the hell scenario, okay? In this scenario, you've got the same curve, the same rapid acceleration of technologies, but the people who talk about the hell scenario say, now, well, what happens if this gets in the hands, this is incredibly powerful technology. What happens if this gets into the hand of madmen or fools, right? Anybody heard about the Australian mousepox incident? Australia is one of those isolated ecosystems where occasionally there's some introduced species that has no natural enemies, and it just runs amok. And one of these species is mice. From time to time, it's just mice everywhere in Australia, just overrunning everything, more mice than you know what to do with. So these Australian scientists were tremendously interested in coming up with a mouse contraceptive. Instead, they produced a monster. What they did is they took a virus called the mousepox virus, and they made one genetic change in this mousepox virus, and all of a sudden, this new life form was 100% fatal. Every single mouse died. And then, being good scientists, they took what they'd learned and they put it on the internet, where anybody can see it. Well, this drives the people who worry about the hell scenario, this just drives them nuts, because the mousepox virus, it doesn't hurt humans, but it's a very close relative of the smallpox virus, which obviously does. So, this kind of technology, it's not like nuclear weapons where it takes, all kinds of things to create. This biology is within the hands of any reasonably bright graduate student in a semi-well-equipped lab. So now you have the information on the net that exists out there. If you can get a hold of a smallpox virus, in principle, you can create, right now, a 100% fatal disease. Well, this just drives the hell scenario people nuts. They think, oh my God, this could, lead to the wiping out of the human race in the next 20 years. And that's the optimistic version. The pessimistic version is if you wipe out all of life on Earth, And again, is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't make predictions. But it's a credible scenario. Could happen. All right? But the trouble, this is the one that I'm rooting for. This is Preveil. The trouble with both the heaven and the hell scenarios is that they are techno-deterministic, meaning that they have a shared belief that technology is moving so fast that there's not much that humans can do about it. That humans are in control, that technology is in control, and humans are along for the ride. Could be, but I hate that scenario. Hate those scenarios. The heaven and hell scenarios are based on the notion that what matters is how many transistors you can get to talk to each other. Preveil is based on the notion, is a humanistic scenario. It's based on the possibility that maybe what matters is how many ornery, cussed, unpredictable, imaginative humans you can hook up. Heaven and hell take Moore's law and say, okay, that's the future. Preveil says, no, that's not tremendously likely. That's not the way history usually works. That if humans are in control, then what you're going to see is reverses and loops and belches and farts, and that's the way history usually works. Now, I hope that's true because I'm a humanist, but the big question is, okay, how would you know if the humanist scenario was winning. Well, the heart of Preveil is the notion that maybe there's not one curve, maybe there's two curves, okay? If your challenges are coming at you faster and faster like this, well, if your responses are more or less flat, then obviously, right, we're toast, right? Because the distance just keeps on getting farther and farther between our challenges. Okay, so that's hopeless. But suppose our responses are going up almost as fast as our challenges. Now, there's reasons for guarded optimism about that. This has happened before. Back in the 1200s, in Europe, for example, you look out at the future of the human race, and you see marauding hordes, you see plague, and you think, okay, not much future for this species, right? You know, future looks bad. Then in 1450, you know, you get the first printing press. I know the Koreans did it 200 years before. I know. but 1450 is when people began to notice, at least in that part of the world. And anyway, the response was pretty amazing. All of a sudden, you had a brand new way of storing and sharing and collecting information that you didn't have before. And the first thing that happened was the Renaissance. And then you got the Enlightenment, which led to democracy and to science itself and the whole world that we've got around us now. And all of a sudden, all of the worries about the year 1200 suddenly seem quaint, right? Well, what's interesting to me about that story is that all of that change was beyond the imagination of any one king or any one country. I mean, nobody could have controlled this. I mean, it was all bottom up. The people of Venice, Italy, didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I think we're going to invent world trade. That's not how it worked. What happened was that they got chased off their land by the marauding hordes. They moved out into the swamp, and they started trying to figure out if there was some way they could make some money. So they started building boats to take soldiers to the Crusades, and the rest is history. World trade occurred. But it was all bottom up. It was all individuals doing the best they could under the circumstances, not necessarily waiting for leaders. The same thing happened on 9/11. Flight 93, the fourth jet, never makes it to its target. Why? Because the Air Force was so smart? No. Because the White House was so smart? Hell no. It's because a bunch of people on board that aircraft, empowered by their airphone technologies, figured out, diagnosed, and cured their society's ills in a little under an hour flat. Was it an ideal solution? No. They all died. But it was good enough. And it was bottom up. It was not waiting for leaders. So the question is, well, all right, so if you were trying to figure out whether this Preveil scenario was coming to pass, how would you know if this humanistic scenario was the one that was coming about? Well, maybe the way you'd know is maybe you'd see really complicated behavior among humans who were behaving like a flock, who were behaving like a swarm in ways that were brand new, that had everybody scratching their head. Well, have we seen any of those lately? How about eBay? That's not just the world's biggest flea market. That's hundreds of millions of people worldwide who are conducting incredibly complex behavior without leaders. What about YouTube? Okay, we heard earlier this morning that that's not only did it transform the Obama campaign, but it's transforming entertainment with hundreds of people coming together to create new forms of entertainment. What about Twitter? I have no idea what Twitter is good for. None. But if it flips out the Iranian government, I'm interested, okay? I mean, I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is maybe something that's worth knowing. So this is the kind of bottom-up, swarm, humanistic behavior that might be the harbinger of Preveil. Preveil is basically a bet on humans being surprising. It displays a faith in humans coming together in unexpected ways. The test of the Preveil scenario would be the quantity, quality, variety, and complexity of ways that humans find to connect. The test would be interesting group behavior, like a flock doing amazing things. Now, this particularly interests me here in Korea, this whole idea of humans coming together in novel ways to bring about new realities in the face of new challenges. You all know about and yang, yin and yang, right? Am I that? Okay, you all know about that. I mean, it's on your flag, right? You know, tae guk ki, right? Okay, it's on the flag. You guys know about this. Koreans know how to focus group behavior on a task in ways that elude a lot of people in the West. Koreans bring wisdom to the idea of group behavior and experience that you don't always see in the rest of the world. I mean, what it's occurred to me as I've been listening the last 2 days, it's occurred to me that maybe it's your fate. Maybe it's your fate to save mankind. The significance of all of this, it's occurred to me, is that we've been trying for a long time to see if there's any other life in the universe. We've been looking for signals throughout the universe of any other intelligence. And we haven't heard it. It's occurred to me to think maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe every intelligent species gets to the point where they take control of their own evolution. Maybe this is the final exam. Maybe everybody else out there in the universe has flunked. So I say to you, perhaps it's your fate. Please help us not flunk. Thank you very much.